Chapter 1. The Quiet House. Eleanor had stopped counting birthdays. Somewhere after 60, the numbers became less a celebration and more a measure of absence. Yet each morning still carried its own kind of grace. She rose at 6, out of habit more than necessity. The house was silent, the kind of silence that seemed to remember voices long gone. She padded into the kitchen in her slippers, filled the kettle, and set it on the stove. Outside, dawn was breaking over the dogwood trees. The garden Robert had once tended so faithfully was wild now, though she trimmed when she could. He had loved those roses, deep crimson, nearly black at their edges. Every spring, he'd say, they were proof God-favored color above all things. The kettle whistled. She poured the water into her chipped mug, dropping in a bag of Earl Grey. She sat by the window, letting the steam fog the glass as she watched the sparrows dart about the feeder. On the counter lay the day's mail, mostly advertisements, a coupon for tires, a glossy brochure for senior living, a reminder of her next doctor's appointment. Beneath them, a card from her church's prayer circle. In careful handwriting, it read, "We are praying for your joy today." She closed her eyes. Joy. The word was heavy. It was not that she doubted heaven's existence. She had sung hymns of golden streets and read scriptures promising glory. Yet between faith and certainty was a fog. Did joy truly wait? Or had she only woven it into comforting threads to soften her fear of the unknown? Her children called often, her grandchildren sent drawings and school reports, but the nights were long. Robert's slippers still sat by the back door. Sometimes she almost heard him, his cough, his laughter, the creak of his chair. 42 years of marriage etched him so deeply into her soul that absence itself had weight. "I'm getting sentimental again," she whispered to herself, brushing a tear from her cheek. The clock ticked, steady as always. That night, Eleanor dreamed. She stood at the edge of a wood, the air damp with pine. A narrow path wound forward, ending at a gate of iron overgrown with ivy. Its hinges looked ancient, as though they had not been touched in centuries. Beyond it lay a glow, no lantern, no sun, but something more alive than light. A voice whispered, gentle as wind, "Come and see." Her heart leapt. She reached for the latch. The gate groaned open, and she awoke breathless, her hands trembling in the dark. The dream clung to her all morning. Folding laundry, feeding the neighbor's cat, writing a thank-you note. Through it all, the image of the glowing gate returned again and again. By evening, as she sat once more at the kitchen window, she admitted the truth. For the first time in many years, she longed not for yesterday, nor merely for tomorrow, but for a world she had not yet known. Chapter 2. The Gate. The dream returned the next night. This time she stepped fully through the gate. The world beyond felt more real than the waking one. Colors sang. The sky glowed with a clarity that pierced her soul. The path beneath her feet hummed faintly, as though it remembered every step of every pilgrim who had walked it before. She looked back once, but the gate had vanished. Only the forest remained, dense and mysterious. Ahead stretched the road, bending gently over a hill. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Closer than you think," a voice answered. She turned. Beside her stood a man, not young, not old, with eyes that carried the patience of deep soil. He wore no crown, no robe, only a gardener's coat, faded with work. In his hands was a staff carved with vines. "Who are you?" she asked. "Just a gardener," he replied with a smile, "and a friend of your father." Something in his tone loosened the knot in her chest. She nodded, though questions swirled. "Every longing you've carried," he said, "has a home here. You are not alone." Eleanor followed him up the hill. At its crest she gasped. A valley stretched wide below, threaded with rivers that glittered like crystal. Meadows swayed in a breeze that seemed to laugh. Trees rose higher than cathedrals, their leaves shining like emerald flame. In the distance, mountains lifted white peaks against a sapphire sky, and on the road ahead, other travelers walked, some slowly, leaning on staffs, others running as though set free from old burdens. She saw faces bright with recognition as they embraced companions along the way. Tears blurred her vision. She had never seen such joy. The gardener laid a hand on her shoulder. You've only begun. Keep walking. Shall I continue by expanding chapters 3-5, Eleanor's companions on the journey, their sorrows, and first glimpses of reunion? Or would you prefer me to keep drafting sequentially all the way through part 1, 5,000 words, before moving into the reunion and banquet parts? You said, yes. ChatGPT said, wonderful, thank you for confirming. Since you said yes, I'll continue expanding the story in the same tone, step by step. This next installment will move us deeper into part 1, The Weight of Days, giving you more of Eleanor's early journey through the Dreamgate world. Installment 2, Chapters 3-5, a 3,000 words draft. Chapter 3, The Fellow Travellers. The path descended into the valley, soft beneath Eleanor's feet. The air carried a sweetness she could not name, something like lilac, something like the smell of bread fresh from an oven. Each breath filled her with a strength she had not felt in years. Along the way, she saw others walking. One man sat by the roadside, his hands folded over a simple walking stick. His back was bent, his face weathered, yet his eyes held a clear light. He looked up as she passed. First time? He asked kindly. I suppose so, she replied, though she wasn't sure what time meant in this place. He chuckled. It shows. I'm Samuel. Eleanor introduced herself and sat beside him. I was a farmer, he said. Wheat, mostly. Hard years, but good ones too. His voice caught. Lost my boy when he was 17. An accident. That sorrow never left me. His gaze lifted toward the horizon where the mountains rose. But here I've heard he waits for me. Stronger than before. It keeps me walking. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. My husband, she whispered. Robert, 42 years. Samuel placed his hand gently over hers. Then you understand. We walk with longing, but not without hope. They rose together and soon met another traveller, a woman, small in stature but radiant with quiet courage. She leaned on a cane carved with flowers. Margaret, she introduced herself. I battled illness half my life. Pain was my constant companion. She smiled. But it taught me to see beauty in small things. And now... She lifted her cane, tossing it lightly in her hand. I feel lighter each step. The three of them walked together. Though they had just met, there was no awkwardness. Grief had made them kin, but hope bound them closer still. Chapter 4, The Singing Stream. The road curved toward a stream that danced across polished stones. Its waters sparkled as though carrying shards of stars. Samuel stooped to cup the water in his hands. He drank, and his lined face seemed younger. Margaret followed, sighing with relief. Eleanor knelt hesitantly. The water kissed her lips, cool and sweet beyond imagination. At once her weariness seemed to fall away. Her joints loosened, her breath deepened, her heart swelled with vigor. She felt alive. Then the stream began to hum. At first it was faint, like wind through reeds. Then it rose, a melody without words, yet filled with meaning. Eleanor heard laughter in its tones, the echo of children playing, the harmony of choirs she had long ago joined. Is it singing? She asked, astonished. Margaret nodded, eyes shining. All creation here sings. It was only on earth we forgot to listen. Eleanor dipped her hands again, letting the song soak into her bones. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of wonder. The gardener, who had been walking silently nearby, spoke at last. Do you see? Nothing is wasted. Even the streams remember joy. They crossed, the melody following them until it blended with the wind. Chapter 5, The First Reunion. Night, though it was not darkness, more like a soft cloak of twilight, fell as they came to a meadow lit by fireflies. In the centre stood a great oak, its branches stretching like arms of welcome. Beneath it, figures gathered, greeting one another with cries of recognition. Eleanor's heart pounded. For among them she saw a woman, grey hair pinned back, hands folded as they had been so often in prayer. The face was older than in Eleanor's childhood memories, yet unmistakable. "Mother?" Eleanor whispered. The woman looked up. Her eyes widened. She opened her arms. Eleanor ran. She had not run in decades, but now her legs carried her as though on wings. She fell into her mother's embrace, the scent of lavender and bread flooding her senses. "My girl, her mother murmured, holding her close. My dearest girl. All the years of absence collapsed in an instant. The words Eleanor had wished to say, the gratitude, the apologies, the longing, they poured out in sobs and laughter. Her mother stroked her hair. No regrets here, only beginnings. Samuel and Margaret stood nearby, smiling through their own tears. The gardener's eyes glimmered with quiet joy. Eleanor clung to her mother, overwhelmed. For the first time since Robert's passing, her heart felt not only healed, but expanded. Here in this meadow, she understood, heaven was not an ending. It was reunion, it was restoration, it was the fulfillment of every true longing. Chapter 6. The Hall of Memories. Morning came not with sun, but with a kind of golden clarity that seemed to rise from the ground itself. Eleanor awoke beneath the oak tree, her mother's hand still resting gently in hers. The air hummed with quiet expectancy, as though something awaited them beyond the meadow. The gardener beckoned. There is more to see. Come. They walked together until the road led them to a hall carved into a hillside. Its doors were tall, inlaid with pearl and wood, and opened without touch. Inside stretched a chamber of glass, like a cathedral woven of light. As Eleanor stepped in, scenes began to shimmer on the walls, moments from her life. She saw herself as a little girl running barefoot through summer grass, her father lifting her onto his shoulders. She saw her wedding day, Robert smiling nervously, the way his hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto her finger. She saw herself years later, exhausted, rocking her newborn son to sleep, whispering prayers she could not even remember now. Tears blurred her eyes. I had forgotten, she whispered. The gardener's voice was low. Nothing is forgotten here. All is redeemed. Eleanor trembled as one memory rose before her. The night Robert passed, the hospital room filled with antiseptic and sorrow. She had held his hand, whispering that it was all right to let go, though inside her soul had been tearing. The image flickered, then softened. Instead of the cold hospital bed, she now saw Robert rising, whole, smiling, his eyes alight with youth and strength. She gasped, clutching her chest. The vision faded, but hope now burned in its place. Chapter 7. The Valley of Longing. The companions continued their journey, descending into a valley veiled with mist. Here the air felt different, heavy, like the ache of unsung songs. All along the path stood figures, some weeping, some silent, holding broken instruments or tattered books. Their eyes were fixed upward, waiting. Margaret slowed. What is this place? The gardener answered gently. Here dwell the unfulfilled longings of earth. Every dream cut short, every song unsung, every kindness withheld. All who pass must walk through their own valley. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. Images surged. Her wish to travel with Robert after retirement. The conversations left unfinished. The forgiveness she had been too proud to offer. She sank to her knees. I failed so much. The gardener knelt beside her. Eleanor, every longing in you is a seed. Here the seeds bloom. At his words, the mist stirred. From the ground rose blossoms of light, each one carrying the fragrance of joy. Eleanor reached out. One flower unfolded to reveal a scene. She and Robert walking hand in hand through a city of light, laughter spilling between them. Another bloom revealed her children, radiant, free of every burden, singing in harmony. Tears streamed down her cheeks. So nothing is wasted? Nothing, the gardener said. Your father gathers every tear and weaves them into joy. They walked on, the valley behind them glowing as flowers continued to bloom in their wake. Chapter 8. The Reunion. At last they came to a clearing. In the centre stood a simple wooden gate, much like the one Eleanor had first seen in her dreams. Beyond it lay a garden unlike any she had ever known, trees bending with fruit that glowed, air alive with fragrance, streams singing as they wound through the grass. And there, just beyond the gate, stood Robert. He looked younger than she remembered, yet entirely himself. His shoulders were strong, his hair dark once more, but his smile, that beloved, steady smile, was the same. Eleanor froze, unable to breathe. Robert stepped forward, eyes brimming. Ellie? Her knees gave way. She stumbled, but he caught her in his arms, pulling her close. The scent of him, the warmth, the sound of his laugh. It was all real, more real than memory. "I thought I'd never see you again," she sobbed. He lifted her chin. "Did you not know? I was waiting. Every moment since I left, I was waiting for this." She pressed her forehead to his. "I still feel old, broken, small." But he shook his head. "Not here. Here we are as we were meant to be." They held each other for what felt like eternity, yet without the fear of time slipping away. Around them, the garden pulsed with joy, as though creation itself celebrated their reunion. At last, Robert drew back slightly. "Come, there's more yet to see. You haven't even heard the music." Hand in hand, they stepped into the garden together.
Chapter 9: The Garden of Recognition. The garden stretched farther than Eleanor could see. Each tree bent low as though bowing in welcome. Fruit hung like jewels, and when she reached for one, an apple the color of sunrise, it seemed to leap into her hand. She bit into it, and warmth spread through her body, like laughter rising from her heart. Robert chuckled, watching her face. "Better than my pancakes?" he teased, just as he had done countless Saturday mornings. She laughed through her tears. "You remembered." "How could I forget? Every crumb, every smile, every argument, every quiet night. Here nothing is lost, Ellie. Not one moment." They wandered the paths, and with each turn Eleanor met faces long unseen, a grandmother, radiant with youth, her childhood friend Clara, who had died too young but now danced like the girl Eleanor remembered, mentors, neighbors, even students she had taught decades before. Each embraced her not with sorrow for the years apart, but with the joy of a bond never truly broken. "This is impossible," Eleanor whispered. Robert shook his head. "No, this is more possible than anything we knew before. All the earth was the shadow. This is the substance." As they walked, a song swelled faintly in the distance, so full and rich that Eleanor's knees trembled. Robert smiled knowingly. "They're calling us to the table." Chapter 10: The River of Remembrance. The travelers gathered again. Samuel, Margaret, Eleanor, Robert, and countless others. The gardener led them to a wide river, broader than any sea Eleanor had known. Its waters shone with every color, as though light itself had been poured into liquid form. "This," the gardener said, "is the river of remembrance." Samuel stepped forward first. He knelt, cupping the water in his hands. His shoulders shook, then straightened. His son emerged from the far bank, running across as though the water itself lifted him. They embraced, laughter echoing across the valley. Margaret was next. She dipped her cane into the river. It dissolved, as though made of mist. She gasped, her body radiant, every line of pain erased. She lifted her arms and sang, a voice pure and strong, never once breaking. The travelers joined her song until the air itself seemed to tremble with joy. Eleanor approached last, Robert's hand in hers. She bent low, touching the water. Images rose, every moment of sorrow she had carried. The night Robert passed, the loneliness, the longing. Each memory touched the water and transformed, becoming light, rising into the sky like lanterns. Robert whispered, "It's over now." She turned into his arms, weeping. Yes, over and yet more real than ever. The river carried their tears away, not as loss, but as glory. Chapter 11: The Procession. After crossing, the travelers found garments laid out for them, robes white as snow, yet woven with threads of color unique to each soul. Eleanor's shimmered with shades of rose and gold, colors she had never thought belonged to her, but now felt utterly right. Robert's robe glowed with blue like deep ocean. Samuel's carried threads of amber. Margaret's gleamed emerald. Each robe told a story. Suffering endured, faith preserved, love poured out. The gardener spoke. "You are clothed in what was planted in your earthly days. Now come, your king awaits." Trumpets sounded. A road of crystal unfurled before them, leading up a hill crowned with light. They walked together, A great procession of countless souls, each singing, each radiant. The music grew louder, not from instruments alone, but from creation itself. Trees swayed in rhythm, rivers pulsed, mountains echoed. Eleanor's steps felt lighter than air. Robert squeezed her hand. Almost home. Chapter 12. The Banquet Hall. At the hill's crest, Eleanor saw it, the table. It stretched farther than sight, adorned with goblets of gold and plates of silver, yet no two settings alike. Each bore symbols of a life remembered: a book, a seed, a loaf of bread, a brush, a child's toy. The hall itself was not enclosed. It was the open sky, jeweled with stars that sang. Light radiated from the head of the table, where a presence sat, not blinding, but warm, drawing every soul with irresistible love. As Eleanor drew near, she felt her heart swell until she thought it might burst. The presence spoke, not in thunder, but in a voice that reached the deepest places of her being. "Welcome, beloved. Well done." The words washed over her like fire and water, cleansing every hidden fear. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Robert knelt beside her, tears streaming. Samuel and Margaret bowed, radiant with joy. Then music erupted. Laughter, song, voices blending in a harmony that no choir on earth had ever touched. The feast began, and every soul took their place. Eleanor lifted her cup. It overflowed, not with wine alone, but with joy itself. She turned to Robert, to her mother, to the countless friends surrounding her, and for the first time in her life, she felt not longing, but completion. Heaven was not only reunion, it was the beginning of everything true. Chapter 13. The Music Beyond. The feast went on without end, not in length of time, but in depth of joy. Dishes appeared and vanished, each more delightful than the last. Flavors Eleanor had never tasted on earth, yet each bite felt strangely familiar, as though she had been longing for it all her life. Laughter swelled around the table. Children danced between the seats. Elders sang old hymns with new power, and the stars overhead pulsed with rhythm. Yet even amid such wonder, Eleanor felt something stirring. It was not dissatisfaction, but a kind of holy restlessness, as though the feast was only the first note of a symphony. She turned to Robert. "Is there more?" He smiled knowingly. "Of course, joy never stops here, it only grows." And then she heard it, the faint strains of another melody beyond the hall, rising like dawn over mountains. It was wilder, freer, like the call of a distant sea. The gardener appeared beside them. "You have feasted, now you are ready to journey further." Chapter 14. The City of Light. They rose from the table, yet did not feel hunger. Instead, their souls were filled with eagerness. The road curved downward into a valley where light shimmered as though woven into stone. At the center stood a city, walls gleaming like crystal, gates of pearl, streets flowing with rivers of living water. But unlike earthly cities, it did not confine, it expanded, each avenue leading outward into endless horizons. Eleanor entered through the gates and gasped. Every home was alive with welcome. Balconies spilled over with laughter. Gardens bloomed on rooftops. Music poured from open windows. Neighbors embraced without suspicion. Children ran without fear, and the air itself thrummed with peace. Robert whispered, "This is what we were always meant for, not buildings and walls, but fellowship without end." As they walked, Eleanor saw artisans painting with colors that glowed, musicians weaving harmonies with the wind, builders shaping houses that seemed to grow like trees. Each soul brought their gift, and all blended into harmony. She realized heaven was not an endless choir alone, but an eternal unfolding of every true gift, every holy longing. Her heart swelled with hope so vast it seemed it might burst. Chapter 15. The Mountain of Meeting. From the city, the road climbed toward a mountain. The travelers gathered once more, led by the gardener. The ascent was steep, yet every step filled them with strength. The higher they climbed, the clearer the air became, like breathing pure joy. At the summit, a vast plain opened, with a throne at its center, not distant, but near, as though the very heart of reality had drawn close. The presence who had welcomed them at the table now rose in majesty. His face was like fire and water, his eyes like galaxies, yet his smile like that of a father bending low to a child. Every soul fell silent. Eleanor felt herself undone, yet utterly safe. She heard the voice again. "Beloved, you thought your story was ending, but it is only beginning. Every joy you knew was the first page. Here, the book opens without end." Light poured from the throne, washing over them. Each wound of earth was not merely healed, it was transformed into glory. Every sorrow became a jewel, every tear a song. Eleanor looked at Robert. His face shone, not with borrowed light, but with the reflection of love eternal. She knew her own face bore the same. Chapter 16. The Endless Dawn. The light faded into a dawn unlike any she had seen. Not the end of night, but the beginning of forever. Eleanor found herself standing once more at a gate, but this time not as a visitor, not as a dreamer. This was home. She turned to Robert, to her mother, to Samuel and Margaret. "What do we do now?" The gardener smiled. "Now you live. You create, you explore, you rejoice. Every longing in you has a place here, and every joy yet to be discovered will call you onward." Eleanor breathed deeply. The air was alive, her heart overflowing. She felt no fear of endings, for there were none. Only beginnings, flowing like rivers into eternity. Hand in hand with Robert, she stepped forward. Behind her, the banquet still rang with laughter. Ahead, the city glowed with welcome. Beyond, mountains, oceans, and galaxies beckoned. Hope rose in her, not as comfort but as fire. Heaven was not merely the promise of rest, it was the explosion of joy unending. And she knew at last, she was home.